Joining us today is Mark Sale, the CEO of First Class Metals, where we're going to get an introduction, a bit of a project overview on their flagship project, the North Hemlo project. So thank you very much, Mark, for your time today. So, let's just start with a high-level overview of North Hemlo. Then it is your flagship project. So generally, why is it your flagship project, first of all, and what's the high-level overview?
Well, I won't say it's our flagship, but good morning, Mark. I won't say it's our flagship by default, but it was the property that was in the prospectus, and it was the focus of the CPR, the Competent Persons Report, for our listing document. It is, however, almost 50% of the total land holding that we have in Ontario, in that Hemlo-Schreiber Greenstone Belt. So in that regard, yes, it's a prominent property. It's one that we feel has near-term more information that will allow us to advance it, if that makes sense. And that comes back to what I've said previously about most of our properties, to be honest, Mark, and that is a combination of several factors. The lack of detailed historic exploration, partly due to technology in the day, the nearology, and that is our neighbours have had success in their exploration, and the vectors, and that is that success that has been expounded by our neighbours, we believe follows on to our properties, be it geological, geochemical, or geophysical. And in that regard, the North Hemlo property, as I say, 90 square kilometres, 427 claim blocks. 33 of those claim blocks are under an earning joint venture agreement with Palladium One, who is our neighbour to the east and has the significant nickel showing at Smoke Lake. I think some of the values that they've reported there, near double-digit nickel, are some of the highest that have been reported in Ontario, possibly even Canada in the last decade, I'm told. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's so. So they undertook a drilling program on West Pickle Lake anomaly, which was identified through a VTEM, high-definition magnetic survey, and then followed up by soil sampling. Those results are pending now with Palladium One, obviously. We're under a very tight NDA with them, so I better not say too much about it, but we await the results with eagerness, shall we say. And if we swap over to our western boundary, Palladium One's on the east, Panther is on our west, and they have their dotted lake occurrence, which again, geologically and geophysically, we can trace onto our property. In fact, the dotted lake showing, we believe, is on our property, and that has almost 0.5% copper and 0.25% of zinc. So we've got this nickel prospect in the east at West Pickle Lake, and then we've got the dotted lake continuation onto our property on the western boundary. And then to the south of us, as you're probably aware, Hemlo Explorers has quite a large tract of land, and they have been drilling with some success near our southern boundary. And just coincidentally, in the south of our claim, there is a historic showing called the Dead Otter Lake showing, which had 3.1 grams gold and, significantly, 0.5% of molybdenum. Well, people say molybdenum. What good is molybdenum? I think there's one dedicated molybdenum mine in the world. However, let's not lose sight of the fact that the Hemlo gold mine, 23 million ounces, past, present, and future resources reserves, is characterized by the fact it's on a shear with a very high molybdenum signature. So the North Hemlo property, in that regard, is also interpreted as sitting on what they call the north limb, Hemlo itself being on the south limb of the Greenstone Belt with a shear running through it. So not only do we have a cornucopia of base metals, copper, zinc, and nickel, but we also have significant gold associated, we believe, with the interpreted shear and containing molybdenum. So that's the high-level view. And you can understand why I'm so enthusiastic about the work we're doing there.
Yeah, well, before we talk about the work that's being done there by the First Class, or indeed historical work that has been done on the property, what about what commodities are you targeting here?
We're not being blinkered in that regard, Mark. We are working systematically across the property. In fact, we have people on the ground at the moment, and I'm heading out there this time next week. I'll be in transit, shall we say, to go and have a look at what the guys are doing on the ground. We're systematically working through the property at the moment, eagerly awaiting the interpretation of a V10 survey that we contracted over the whole property, over 4,000 line kilometres. We flew with a helicopter, low level, high resolution, detailed magnetics. We're hoping to get those that interp in September, but in the meantime, we're continuing following up systematically around those historic showings, the nickel, the copper, the zinc, and the gold, as well as pushing out into areas that we don't believe have ever been thoroughly prospected previously. So what commodities? At the moment, I would have to say base metal, battery metal, precious metals. That just about covers the whole Dyson shooting match.
Okay, yeah, so quite a few then. Okay, so what's been done historically on this project, and have you got access to plenty of past data?
We undertook, Emerald Geological Services, on our instruction, undertook a very detailed review of the past data. But as I say, there hasn't been a systematic exploration. And by that, our North Hemlo property boundary, shall we say, has variously, let's say over the last 20 years, going back to the 80s, has variously been held in part by other companies. So there's a patchwork quilt of magnetic data, geophysics data, sampling across the property, but it's never been held by one person in the past and therefore prospected, explored systematically. And in that regard, First Class, when they put their property portfolio together, what is now our North Hemlo property was actually 3 claim blocks which weren't all contiguous. It was the deal that we did with Power Metals, which held the center jigsaw piece, if you like, which then made the whole block contiguous and gave us this 90 square kilometers of tract with, I believe, phenomenal potential, as I previously said, because of the neurology and the vectors. So, no, there hasn't been systematic exploration. Mm-hmm. There's areas of the claim that there's certainly no historic indications of sampling, showings as they call them. There are areas, as I've mentioned, like the Dotted Lake, the Dead Otter and the West Pickle Lake, where work has been done, which will enable us to focus into vector in on parts of the property which haven't previously had detailed, systematic, intense exploration.
Okay. So then when it comes to the work that you're going to be doing and the plans that you've mentioned some surveys that are underway. What is in the roadmap then? What's it looking like for exploration here at the North Hemlo property?
Well, we'll continue with the ground exploration. As I say, that will be augmented next month in time before the end of the field season with the interp of the V10. We'll carry on that. In the meantime, we are obviously in discussions with the First Nations who have traditional claim over the North Hemlo area, discussing exploration permit applications. As you're aware, I'm sure, Mark, that in order to conduct what they call invasive exploration, that's clearing of tracks for drill access or trenching, before you can do that, you need to have an exploration permit which is authorised by the Crown, and part of that process is discussion with the First Nations to make sure that you're not disturbing any areas in their traditional lands that they feel are really critical to them. So we've taken the approach that we're discussing with the First Nations before we submit it to the Crown. So in order to try and answer your question a little bit more thoroughly, we are advancing the ground reconnaissance in order to identify the areas that we would want to be subject to the exploration permit that going forward would then include road access, trenching, and ultimately, of course, with the identifying of drill targets, drilling. That's our aim is for next field season. I think it's possible, but it's unlikely that we'll be drilling, let's say, this year. The field season obviously stops when the first snows come, which could be early November. Who knows in current global climatic conditions. Some areas, yes, are more amenable to drilling in the winter when everything's frozen. So it's still all to play for as to when we start drilling on North Hemlo. Obviously, we have targets. We feel we're building those targets, certainly with the copper, zinc prospects and the gold prospects.
Okay. You say hopefully starting drilling next field season. So that's when, from next spring, is that right?
That's correct. Yes,
Yeah.
we're in the northern hemisphere, so we started field work this year in May. But we have money allocated in our budget for drilling on North Hemlo, so it's not a funding issue. But obviously, we're not going to drill for the sake of drilling. We will be drilling when we're able to through the exploration permits. And when geologically, geochemically, we feel we have veritable drill targets on the basis of what we're seeing.
Okay. And on those, then, I mean, it is very important to make sure you are using the early stage exploration to maximize the potential for when you actually put the drill into the ground, because it is logistically challenging and does come with a cost. And of course, shareholders do want to see, returns put from their investment. So when are you hoping to be able to perhaps announce some of that early field work and reconnaissance stuff to the market? Are you hoping sort of back end of this year?
We've got samples in the lab. The preliminary results are dribbling in slowly. There's a real backlog of samples in the labs. The gold you can get rushed through, but the big picture is the gold and the base metals. So I wouldn't want to draw any conclusions until we had the complete sweep back. They're coming back slowly, as I say, preliminary. I would like to think into September, we will start to get a cohesive picture so we can start releasing information out to the market on some of these assays, be they North Hemlo or one of the other properties that we hold. We've done field work on 6 of our 7 claim blocks this year. So we do have quite a bit of news, I hope, very positive news in the pipeline. So yes, I'm looking forward to September, October, releasing analysis. And just as a slight aside, Mark, we acquired the VTEM over ESSA, which is a block to the south of North Hemlo, 11 kilometres north of the Hemlo gold mine. And we are also reprocessing and having that reinterpreted. So there is news in the pipeline, which we will be released as and when we're able to, and to the market to keep the investors up to date and interest peaked.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear, Mark. So thank you very much for your time today. Mark Sale, the CEO of First Class Metals, talking to us there about the North Hemlo project.